The sound of eggs splattering against a garage door was the last thing Tasha Williams expected to hear on a quiet Sunday morning. It was a wet, sickening thwack, followed by the slow, viscous drip of what could only be yolk. The piece of her coffee and crossword puzzle was shattered in an instant. She ran outside, the cold morning air biting through her thin cotton robe, her slippers slapping against the damp concrete of the driveway. And there was 3 perfect, oozing splashes of sticky yellow against the brilliant white of the garage door. The yolk slid downward in slow, deliberate trails, already crusting the edges in the cool air. On the curb, a nondescript sedan, a gray Toyota Camry, sped off, and from its open window, she caught the tail end of raucous, mocking laughter that faded with the engine's drone. Tasha sighed, her breath misting in the air, and looked down at the mess. Seriously, she muttered to the empty street, a flush of humiliation warming her cheeks. This was her sanctuary, the first home she'd owned after years of renting, and now it was defaced with something so juvenile, so utterly pathetic. At first, she clung to the simple explanation. Kids being immature. A random, senseless prank. It was annoying, but it happened. She got the hose and a sponge, the cold water barely making a dent on the gummy residue. But as she scrubbed, a nagging doubt took root. The laughter hadn't sounded young. It had a deeper, crueler timbre. And the car, something about it was familiar. Abandoning the cleanup, she went inside and pulled up the feed from the discreet security camera mounted under her eaves. The high-definition video was crystal clear. It showed the Camry slowing to a crawl, the passenger window rolling down. A man's arm emerged, and with a practiced, almost casual flick of the wrist, he launched the 3 eggs in quick succession. The camera, perfectly positioned, caught his face in a brief, unguarded moment as the car pulled away. It was a face she saw at every tedious HOA meeting, a face that had delivered 2 violation notices with a smug, unblinking stare. It wasn't teenagers. It was her neighbor, the HOA vice president, Mike Daniels. Mike was the self-appointed enforcer of the Willow Creek Estates Covenant, a man who wore his navy blue HOA polo like a suit of armor. He was a chronicler of overgrown blades of grass, a connoisseur of improperly stored trash cans, a judge of paint colors 1 shade too vibrant for his muted, beige world. Tasha, a graphic designer with a fondness for bold colors, had been on his radar since she'd moved in 3 months ago. He'd written her up for a welcome mat adorned with bright red poppies, deemed an unapproved eyesore, and again for the excessive water spots on her vintage Volkswagen Beetle after a rain shower. She knew Mike had a problem with her nonconformity, a quiet disdain for the splash of life she brought to his monotonous landscape, but she had dismissed it as the petty tyranny of a small man with a little power. She never imagined his grievance would curdle into this act of cowardly, suburban vandalism. And Mike, as he drove away, chuckled with his equally dull-witted brother-in-law. He had no idea that the woman he just egged wasn't someone to mess with. He saw a single woman who painted her office a cheerful teal. He didn't see the former litigation paralegal who had spent 5 years in a high-powered law firm, learning how to dismantle a case, and a person, piece by meticulous piece. He didn't see the quiet fury now solidifying in her chest, replacing the initial shock and embarrassment. He had just declared war with a carton of eggs, completely unaware that Tasha Williams was a master of the rules, and she was about to use his own rule book to bury him. The game was on, and Mike had already made the first and last mistake. The next evening, the HOA's monthly meeting in the sterile clubhouse felt more like a tribunal. Mike Daniels sat at the head of the table, a laminated agenda and a heavy clipboard placed just so before him, holding court like a neighborhood king. He was mid-sentence, droning on about the unsightly proliferation of pink flamingos on the Miller's lawn, when Tasha Williams slipped in and took a seat in the back row. Mike's eyes snapped to her, and a slow, condescending smirk spread across his face. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence, he announced, his voice dripping with faux cheer. I hope your garage is looking a little cleaner today, Tasha. We wouldn't want another violation for excessive organic matter on exterior surfaces. A few of his usual sycophants offered weak, nervous chuckles, but most of the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. They could all feel the jagged tension slicing through the air. Tasha didn't flinch. She offered a small, calm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Funny you should mention my garage, Mike," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "I actually wanted to show everyone here something. A little neighborhood watch PSA." Before Mike could process her words, she was walking to the front of the room. She pulled a cable from her purse and, with a few deft clicks, connected her phone to the large wall-mounted TV. The screen flickered to life, displaying a video file. With a final tap, she played it. And there he was, Mike Daniels in high-definition glory, time-stamped at 2:17 a.m. The footage was silent, but devastatingly clear. He was creeping up her driveway, his head on a swivel, a cardboard carton of eggs clutched in his hand. He looked furtively left and right, then, with a pitcher's wind-up, began hurling them. 1, 2, 3. The eggs exploded against the pristine white door in sticky yellow bursts. The video ended with him scurrying back to the passenger side of the waiting gray Camry. A collective, sharp intake of breath hissed through the room. Someone at the back muttered, "Oh my God, Mike." Mrs. Gable, the sweet, elderly secretary, put a hand over her heart. Mike shot to his feet, his face mottling a deep, furious crimson. This is a gross misrepresentation. "It's out of context," he spluttered, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. I was conducting a late-night property inspection, and I found those eggs discarded on the curb. I was merely disposing of them." "Disposing of them?" Tasha repeated, her voice smooth as silk, her gaze never leaving his. "By throwing them at my property? That's a novel form of waste management." She turned to address the stunned residents. "Mike has been harassing me since the day I moved in. Over a welcome mat, over water spots on my car. And now, he's escalated to vandalism. So, Mike, here's your choice. You can offer a full, formal apology to me and this entire neighborhood, and you can immediately resign your position on the board. Or, I send this footage to the police to file a formal vandalism report, and to every single member of the full HOA board with recommendation for your removal and a potential civil lawsuit." Mike's eyes bulged. The sheer audacity of being challenged, of being cornered in his own kingdom, short-circuited his brain. He took a heavy step toward her, his portly frame trying to loom, his voice a low, venomous snarl. "You think you can threaten me in my own house? You little—" It was a big mistake. As he stepped into her space, his chest nearly bumping hers, Tasha didn't retreat. She didn't even tense. Her movements were calm and measured, a fluid shift of weight that spoke of a deep, ingrained muscle memory. Her right foot slid back into a solid, grounded stance, her hands coming up not in a fist, but in an open, ready position at her center. It was a poised, economical posture of someone who had spent countless hours in the dojo, a silent language of power and control that filled the space between them more effectively than any shout. The room froze. The change in her was instantaneous and profound. She was no longer just a new neighbor with a colorful mat. She was a pillar of unshakable calm in the face of his blustering storm. Mike, suddenly confronted not with fear, but with absolute readiness, faltered. His aggressive advance halted, his bravado evaporating under the silent, terrifying realization that the woman standing before him was not someone he could intimidate. The air in the clubhouse was thick enough to choke on. Mike Daniels, his face a blotchy mask of rage and humiliation, loomed over Tasha. He was a big man, and he used his size, puffing out his chest and leaning into her space, trying to force her to take a step back, to break her composure with sheer physical presence. It was a tactic that had worked on countless neighbors before. Tasha didn't move an inch. Her feet remained planted, her posture relaxed but unyielding. She was a rock in the center of his turbulent, pathetic stream. The faint, sterile light of the overhead fluorescence glinted in her calm, steady eyes. "Back off, Mike," she said, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper, yet it cut through the tense silence. "You don't want to do this." But bullies, especially cornered ones, don't listen to warnings. They only understand one language. Enraged by her defiance, by the dozens of shocked eyes watching his kingdom crumble, Mike made his final, foolish move. He jabbed a thick, accusatory finger toward her shoulder, a gesture meant to intimidate, to poke and prod her into submission. And before anyone in the room could even process the movement, before a gasp could fully form, she moved. It wasn't a wild, aggressive lunge. It was a study in economical, precise motion. As his finger made contact with her robe, Tasha sidestepped the center line of his force, her body flowing like water. Her left hand came up, not to strike, but to capture his extended wrist, her grip firm and unshakable. In the same continuous, fluid motion, she pivoted, using his own forward momentum and weight against him. It was a simple, elegant Aikido-derived technique, the very kind she drilled into her young self-defense students, a way to neutralize a threat without causing lasting harm. Mike's world tilted. A grunt of shock escaped his lips as his balance vanished. His clipboard flew from his other hand, paper scattering like confetti over the industrial carpet. Then, with a heavy, undignified thud that seemed to shake the very floor, he landed flat on his back. The wind knocked out at him. He lay there, sprawled like a starfish, more stunned than hurt. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The only sound was Mike's ragged, wheezing breath. 40 pairs of eyes were wide with disbelief. Fixed on the scene, Mike on the floor and Tasha standing over him, not with triumph, but with a serene, focused expression on an instructor who had just demonstrated a basic principle. Whoa! A teenager near the back finally whispered, the word echoing in the hush. Did she just... Tasha stepped back, her hand returning to her sides. Calm as ever, the entire encounter had lasted less than 3 seconds. I told you, she said, her voice still level, addressing the room as much as the man on the floor. I'm not the one to mess with. Then, she did something that stunned the audience even more than the takedown. She leaned forward, extending a hand down to him. It wasn't a taunt. It was a genuine offer of help, because that's who Tasha was at her core, strong enough to defend herself, but never cruel enough to revel in another's downfall, no matter how deserved. Dazed and utterly defeated, Mike, after a moment of stunned hesitation, took her hand. She pulled him to his feet with a surprising, effortless strength. He stood there, swaying slightly, dusting off his polo shirt, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The fight, the arrogance, everything had been utterly drained from him. Tasha looked at him, her head tilted slightly. Apology accepted? She asked, her tone leaving no room for anything but assent. Mike's throat worked, but no sound came out. He gave a jerky, almost imperceptible nod, his eyes fixed firmly on the scattered papers from his clipboard, the scattered pieces of his shattered authority. He couldn't even look her in the eye. The HOA enforcer had been disarmed, dismantled, and lifted back to his feet, all without Tasha Williams ever raising her voice or throwing a punch. The video, filmed on a shaky phone from the back row, spread through the Willow Creek Estate's neighborhood chat groups like a California grass fire. At first, the focus was on Mike's shocking, egg-wielding betrayal. But as the clip was replayed, analyzed, and discussed over coffee and fences, the narrative subtly shifted. The story was no longer just about the villain. It was about the hero. People weren't just talking about the egging anymore. They were marveling at how Tasha had stood her ground with a breathtaking combination of grace and strength. They rewatched the moment she didn't flinch, the calm warning, the economical takedown that was more a lesson than an attack, and the stunning, compassionate hand she offered to help him up. It was a masterclass in dignity. The HOA board, facing a mutiny of furious residents, had no choice but to convene an emergency session. The evidence was irrefutable. Mike Daniels was officially and unanimously removed from his vice presidential position for gross misconduct and harassment of a community member. The official letter cited a catastrophic breach of fiduciary duty and community trust. Tasha held all the cards. She had a clear path to press criminal charges for vandalism and potentially sue him personally for emotional distress. But she chose a different kind of justice. She met with the board and requested that, in lieu of legal action, Mike deliver a formal public apology at the next open meeting. It was a punishment far more fitting for a man whose currency was public perception. The following month, the clubhouse was even more packed than before. This time, Mike stood before the residents not as a king, but as a penitent, His shoulders were slumped, and he clutched a single note card with trembling hands. His voice, once a tool of booming authority, was thin and unsteady. "Mrs. Williams," he began, his eyes fixed on a scuff mark on the floor. "I was wrong. My actions were petty, cruel, and childish. I disrespected you. I vandalized your property, and I betrayed the trust of this community. I am truly sorry." The silence in the room was heavy, expectant. All eyes turned to Tasha. She simply nodded, her expression firm but not unkind. "Apology accepted, Mike," she said, her voice carrying easily. "Now, let's all work to make this neighborhood about mutual respect again." From that day forward, no one ever messed with Tasha Williams. But more importantly, they began to listen to her. Her quiet confidence became a beacon. Neighbors started coming to her for advice, not just on HOA bylaws, where her sharp mind quickly dissected the legalese, but on more personal matters. A young mother asked how to handle a bullying issue at her son's school, citing Tasha's poise. An elderly man wondered how to firmly but politely tell a pushy salesman to leave his property. She had become the neighborhood's unofficial advisor on confidence, boundaries, and the art of standing up for oneself without losing one's humanity. A few weeks later, a flyer appeared on the community bulletin board and in every mailbox. It advertised free self-defense classes at the local community center taught by Tasha Williams. The response was overwhelming. Her first class was packed with women and teenagers, their faces a mix of curiosity and nervous excitement. As they stood on the mats, Tasha looked over her new students, a small, knowing smile on her face. "Welcome," she began. "Before we learn a single stance or block, you need to understand the first and most important rule. You are not here to learn how to fight." She let the words hang in the air, seeing their confusion. "You are here to learn confidence, awareness, and control. You train to carry yourself in a way that deters conflict. You train the mind even more than the body. You don't train to fight. You train so you never have to." And Mike, he became a ghost of his former self. He kept his lawn impeccably trimmed and his trash cans hidden from view. He never looked Tasha directly in the eye again, the memory of his humiliation too searing. But one Saturday morning, as Tasha was watering her now-approved vibrant flower beds, a gray Camry drove slowly past. From the driver's seat, Mike Daniels offered a small, hesitant, but unmistakably polite wave. Tasha, after a moment, gave a simple, acknowledging nod. Funny how fast people change their tune when they are met not with reciprocal hate, but with an unshakable strength that exposes their own pettiness. The egg had been wiped away, but the lesson it delivered was permanently etched into the foundation of the neighborhood.